Liberal Democrats, Denis MacShane, former Labour Minister for Europe and Foreign Office Minister and former MP for Rotherham. Belinda is Brexit Party MEP for the South East of England. And Paul Scully is Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party. So we'll get right on and get your questions coming 0345 6060 973.
Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
Well, welcome to you all. Before we start, a quick plug for those of you watching on YouTube. Here's Denis MacShane's new book flyer, Brexiternity, The Uncertain Fate of Britain. That's quite a good word, actually, Brexiternity. It does sort of ring true at the moment, doesn't it, Denis?
I fear so. I first used the word Brexit in 2012.
Are you saying that you invented it?
No, a friend of mine called Peter Wilding lays claim. Some other people in Brussels do. I just say I first used it a lot in columns.
Sounds like an 80s pop band, I think, Brexiternity.
It's going to be...
you failed then.
That's Brexiternal.
Right, let's get on with your questions. As I say, do give us a call if you have a question for our panel, 0345 6060 973. Slightly off the wall question to start with from Ranjit in Birmingham. Hello, Ranjit.
Hello, Iain.
Hi.
I'd like to ask you, what effect do they think the fact that President Trump is trying to, in effect, dismantle the WTO will have on Brexit? Because essentially that will not only remove the bricks and mortar, it will remove the scaffolding, and I think it's going to be hugely detrimental to us. We're going to be left swinging. We're going to be left up the creek without a paddle, essentially, because recently he's removed, he's ensured that there's no more dispute resolution at the WTO by not appointing judges from something that he was supposed to do.
Okay, all right, Ranjit. Thank you very much for your question, Denis MacShane.
15 years in Geneva, quite a lot of WTO experience, and President Trump loves Brexit because it's about breaking down the international rules-based order that's allowed free trade to succeed and grow over the last 50, 60 years. And it's very frightening. Nobody's noticing this. He is pulling out American judges or not renewing them, which means technically under WTO constitutions, it may not be possible anymore to go there and get a ruling. I mean, Britain for 7 centuries has loved international law. We signed more treaties like the WTO one or the UN or the Law of the Sea or the EU than any other country in the world. We love international law. And international law means you have to have an international court or a tribunal or arbitration panel. And I'm afraid President Trump is going hell for leather to break all this down.
Belinda.
Yeah, I do worry about that. Obviously, in this election, Nigel's made it clear that we will support a free trade deal rather than go for the WTO now. And I think Boris has made it quite clear that he's not going to go for a WTO either. I think that's probably off the table. So I don't think we need to be worried too much about us suddenly going for a WTO at the end of 2020. I do think it's worrying, but I think when Trump's at the table...
You would like us to, sure.
For me, that's a great, clean Brexit. But obviously... things like this that that Trump's bringing, unfortunately, recently to the table.
You call him Donald. I mean, it's Boris and
I know.
Nigel.
Well, Trump says a lot of things
Donald.
And he's very brash. But I think when he sat around the table with his friends, I just wonder whether it will play out like that. You know what he's like. He's like big headlines and scary comments. But I do think when he's around the table, we'll just see what happens. But I do think we'll end up with a trade deal rather than WTO.
But, he's obviously great friends with your leader, Nigel Farage. Can Nigel maybe persuade him of the error of his ways on WTO?
I'm not sure. Who knows? Perhaps. I can't comment for Nigel on his relationship with Trump. And I'm not sure whether I think Trump's only spending 48 hours in the UK this week. So I'm not sure if there's a huge amount of time. But why not? Just because Trump says something doesn't mean it's necessarily going to happen. He's all for headlines and acting brash.
Perish the thought. Ed Davey.
I think Ranjit's got a really important point here. Trump is actually taking forward a process that's been happening for a little while with the WTO. I was trade minister between 2010 and 2012 and went to the last
Halcyon days,
the last ministerial at WTO on what was called then the Doha round. This was the international round that WTO led and was supposed to be a global trade treaty. and it didn't happen. And the reason it didn't happen was the rivalry between the United States and China, which has basically prevented global free trade going forward. It's one of the reasons why Donald Trump wants to undermine the WTO even further. And it's one of the reasons why the Brexiteers, when they said, let's have a WTO deal, didn't know what they were talking about. They were talking utter garbage. If you rely on the WTO and that court now, you're relying on, frankly, something that's weaker than it's ever been in its history. And what we've seen since the Doha round collapsed in that Geneva meeting in 2012, we've seen a whole set of regional trade deals. And guess what? The EU has been the most successful in concluding those regional trade deals.
WTO permanently. It was a temporary position for us to take.
Yeah, but it's still a really bad one, because the EU has managed to do deals with with Korea. I was involved in that. The Japanese one, the Canadian one. There's a number of others that are really well cooked. And we're now going to kiss goodbye to them if we leave. I mean, you couldn't make it up. It's a disaster.
Will be rolled over, won't they?
Well, at the moment, there's about 17 that have been rolled over, but there's 70 in total. So, we were told by Liam Fox...
20 or 30 of those are with West Indian Islands, aren't they?
Well, not actually. Most of the ones that have been rolled over were the really small ones, with the exception of South Korea. Most of the deals that Liam Fox has got with very smaller countries. And it's the big deals like Canada and Japan that haven't been rolled over.
There's a huge amount of our
Paul
trade.
Scully.
There's a huge amount of our trade. I forget the exact percentage, but it's way more than half. That's actually related to EU trade deals. That's actually solely with Korea and Switzerland. They are the two really crucial ones that we've got to roll over. And actually, one of the reasons that they haven't been is clearly those countries are waiting to determine how we are leaving. So how our initial trade with the EU is going to be, so that we can.
It's a real risk, isn't it? It's a real risk. But which without Brexit wouldn't have.
Yeah, but I tell you what, Ed, it's a risk that we can actually get on and manage if we can just get past the first stage. But actually, what we find is that the sort of like the Brexit, those of us that want to walk out and find a new relationship with the EU are finding the Lib Dems and other people hugging our legs.
Hang on a second. No.
Can I come back to the original question?
We'll come on to that in a bit. But exactly,
the original question is really important, because actually Ranjit does raise an important point about the judges of the dispute in the dispute courts there, because it was something that actually, I think because of the frustration with Brexit, it did lead to some people, including Nigel Farage, going for this sort of perfection that doesn't exist, frankly, of this no-deal, clean Brexit, which is why we've got this deal that's ready to go, which what we need to get it done so that we can talk about the future.
But hang on a minute. I'm so sorry. As long as Remain stayed firmly on the table in our Parliament, we were never going to get a good deal, and WTO was our only version of Brexit that was available. That's why to sign a treaty when we're on our knees, when we've been cornered, was never a good idea.
Which is why we had
to leave first and then negotiate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can we just agree that if you all talk together, the listeners at home cannot understand a word anybody is saying?
The only person who works in Geneva.
Hang on, Denis.
I'm sorry, but Belinda, the idea that you leave and then you negotiate when you've caused pain to your 27 erstwhile friends and you're outside, so you're not even a member of the club, that your negotiating position is better, is the most absurd approach to negotiation I have ever heard.
So on our knees is the best place. You saying on our knees and cornered with people like
Belinda,
yourself, with all respect.
You would be on your knees if you did no deal and then negotiated.
Sorry, sir, the past 3 years has been chaos driven by incompetent or unwilling MPs refusing to consent to the referendum result.
MacShane.
Well, I think Belinda should just take it easy with her contempt for MPs. They are elected. They represent us. They've been from all parties. And I think if Mrs May, after 2016, had come up with a moderate, sensible proposal, she probably would have got it through. But she went full Farage. No deal is better than a bad deal. If you're a citizen of Europe, you're a citizen of nowhere. This contempt for the idea of any relationship with Europe, sadly, it wasn't really in her psyche. And then she was spat out and thrown into the dustbin of history by, of course, the real Farage man in the Commons, Boris Johnson. But I worked 15 years in Geneva. I know the WTO. The most important thing to remember about the WTO, it doesn't cover what we call services.
Yes, exactly.
80%, oh God, the Liberal Democrats...
Nor does the single market.
The single market covers an awful lot of them. There are 350,000 single market passports given to British traders here in London who can go into any corner of Europe and make money. As of not the 31st of January is absolutely ridiculous. We're just going to leave the treaty technically. Unfortunately, that means Belinda gets her P45 and loses her nice job as an MP. She's MEP.
She's quite happy.
I want to keep her in work. You see, I don't like increasing unemployment.
Waste of money.
Fine, you can resign now. I don't mind. I'll give the money to a charity, and we're then going to enter into, sorry, Iain, a Brexiternity. Years and years of the most god-awful negotiations on Gibraltar, on the British citizens living in Europe, on fishing.
On. No, that's completely wrong, because that's covered in the withdrawal agreement.
It isn't, my dear.
It is.
The withdrawal agreement covers three things. The money we owe, which nobody really disputed, a little bit of niggling. We're not going to be unkind to European citizens living in this country now, but if they want to bring in a relative, or if any more want to come in and work...
That's what happens when you're an independent state. But the withdrawal agreement,
Switzerland
covers citizens' rights.
No, it doesn't.
It does. I don't know how you can not know that.
It even gives the ECJ...
Iain, it covers...
jurisdiction over citizens' rights for years after we leave.
Hang on a second. Ed Davey, you're on the same side broadly as Denis MacShane in this. You would accept that it covers citizens' rights, wouldn't you, the withdrawal agreement?
It does. It does cover citizens' rights, but there are still issues in the future about future citizens which it can't cover. By definition.
But it covers existing people.
Would
you agree with that, Denis? Would you agree with that, Denis?
Iain,
would you agree with that?
Of course, but Iain,
thank you very much. That was all I was saying.
The question is, what happens in the future? You want to bring in your granny, your lover, your boyfriend, your wife. That will require a completely different negotiation. And for all the British citizens living in Europe, they will lose all their free health care because that is not guaranteed in the withdrawal agreement.
But we started off talking about trade. With Denis, we started talking about trade with citizens' rights, which is important. Which clearly,
let me explain.
No, it's clearly important.
Let me explain.
Let me explain. 45 minutes left. I was going to say, because
let me explain. Don't talk over me. You're not Boris Johnson.
Denis, you have had a good go.
We've got 45 minutes, and I just because you talked about Belinda's contempt for MPs. Well, let me try you one, because I've been one for 4 years, and I'm not contemptuous, but I think Belinda was expressing frustration, and I spent 4 years in that place being incredibly frustrated, which I suspect a lot of listeners, whatever side of the argument they are on, share that frustration, because Parliament has showed its impotence, which is why we need a Parliament.
Let's just take a question on this.
Which is why we need to move on to get a relationship, whether it's WTO or not. It's not going to be WTO.
Let's take a question on this from Pauline in Epping, who's texted to say, if there's a Tory majority and Boris gets his deal through, is that the end of the demands for a second referendum? Ed Davey.
Well, the thing is, it probably won't be for this reason, that Boris keeps saying he wants to get Brexit done and his deal will get it done. No, it won't. Because then we go on to stage 2 of Brexit.
No, but it will get the first stage done.
Yeah, of course you'll get the first stage done. But you've agreed just by saying that there's a second stage.
Of course, but nobody's ever hidden that.
Well, yes, but they try to make it Brexit. If Brexit cannot be done, if there's a second stage, because the second stage has to be done.
Actually,
and the fact
let me
you've
explain
admitted
what
2 stages.
No, let me explain what I presume is meant by that. It means that we have then formally left the European Union. We've left the political and legal structures of the European Union. So, in that sense, we have left. So, Brexit, in that sense, is done. But I totally agree.
But they don't say that,
do they? Trade deal. They don't say that, but I just have.
And I agree with you. I'm glad that we agree on the facts.
We usually do.
But Boris Johnson, I'm afraid, isn't saying that to British people this election. He's not saying, get my deal done and then we're going to have years of negotiation. He's trying to pretend it'll all get done by December next year. That is complete deception. And, then if it doesn't get done, he's saying we go to no deal territory. He's admitted that. I mean, this is the most chaotic, risky project ever put forward by a political party at a general election.
Paul Scully, he's right, isn't he? There is no way you can do a trade deal in 10 months, because that's what Boris Johnson is trying to suggest that he can do.
No, look, first of all, when he's talking about get Brexit done, to answer the question, it does end the second referendum in terms, because you've at the moment we've handed our notice in, and on January the 31st, if we get a majority government, we hand our keys back, and that's done. What we're then working out is the future relationship with the EU, but we have left in accordance of Article 50.
So how long will it take to do a trade deal?
Ed, what we're then talking about is how we are leaving, how we are moving on, not whether we are leaving. So it gets rid of that weight, frankly, which has stopped us from having a pragmatic negotiation.
We haven't finished negotiations.
We're negotiating a future trade relationship.
How long is it going to take?
But we will have left. So coming to your point, Iain, about about where we go from there. The point is that we will be in perfect regulatory alignment on the 1st of February, having left the EU. So we're not starting with a blank sheet of paper. Canada plus, which is what a number of us want, this style of settlement is called Canada plus for a reason, because there is a trade deal with Canada that we then need to look at and see how we can tailor it for the UK market and the UK economy. But it's not starting from a blank sheet of paper in either sense.
Just before we go to Denis, I've had a text from Paul who said, Iain, the under 21-year-olds you had on last Monday's panel were much better behaved than this shower. just as a little bit of warning for the rest of the programme.
Right.
If we could just sort of cut down all the cutting in. Denis.
Iain, hold up your hand. I'll stop speaking. We're not that fast. Very basically, if we leave on the end of January, that's like going onto the pitch. It's not even the warm-up. It's not even the first half, the first 10 minutes. It's going to last a long, long time. And in the core economic interests that matter to us, where we're going to deal with 27 countries, each with their own passionate, sovereign national interests to defend. Not saying they're good or they're bad. And these things are going to last an awful long time. And for every business, the Financial Times reports tonight that we've got the biggest decline in manufacturing output in 10 years. For every inward investor, they're going to say, what is our future? Because when you say, Paul, we leave and we're in perfect alignment, that's because we're obeying every EU rule, freedom of movement, European Court of Justice, paying a contribution. As I assume you and Nigel Farage and President Trump want to reduce all of that, then there's going to be reciprocity.
I think, to be fair, in separate ways, I think, that's a holy triumvirate I think you're trying to piece together.
Do you mind if I just cut in a second?
Just before you do that, can I ask you a question, Denis? Which country has the highest inward investment in the European Union?
Which country has got the highest
inward investment? Yeah, other countries investing in it.
Oh, crumbs! We've got every bit of Russian money, Saudi money. Money flows into the city. We are the hot capital.
But you seem to think that will all go.
No, I'm talking about manufacturing money that creates jobs, not money that creates fees for lawyers.
So we still have more than any other country.
We will always have, as long as we have the city we have the lax rules we have.
Oh, come on.
We allow the Russian gentlemen, I say no more than that, to operate in London as they do around Putin. And of course we're going to get that funding.
But Denis,
money.
That's a fraction of the money that comes into this country, as well you know.
No, it's a huge significant.
Well, we've also created more jobs than the rest of Europe put together over the last 9 years. So I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Okay,
record in terms of
sorry,
jobs.
I just need to cut in here. We have listened to these arguments for years, on and on, over and over. It's got to stop. A democratic vote happened. It needs to be implemented. That's that. If it's not implemented, we're no longer a democratic country. It is an absolute abomination to democracy to rerun a referendum because you have the power and platform to try and change a decision that the people made. It is wrong. A second referendum has to go. We have to Brexit. That's that. You've got to just swallow it up, and it would be wonderful if all the energy, creativity and enthusiasm united behind Brexit to make the best of it. We're the 5th largest economy in the world. We can handle it. Stop being so defeatist. It's draining everyone. It's depressing everyone. I'm sorry, but we need to move on.
It is very depressing.
Well, it is depressing in many ways.
Let me give you an example of why it's so depressing. Boris Johnson, several times during the referendum campaign, said you can vote leave, but we'll still stay in the single market. That's what he said. He's on the record several times. And now as Prime Minister, he's putting a deal where, guess what? We're leaving without staying in the single market. Completely.
Even if he did suggest a single market, you still wouldn't vote for that deal, would you?
No, but what I'm saying is, we're having Belinda saying it's all about democracy. Well, he completely lied to the British people.
Oh, so did both sides.
And he's lying now. So all we are saying is, if you've got this belief that it's going to be so fantastic, put this deal back to the British people.
How dare you tell the British public? How dare you tell
dare you tell me not to say that the British public should have the final say? They should have the final say.
It's so wrong. It is so
about
immoral.
2 weeks
I
ago,
can't
Ed, you
believe
wanted to
you're peddling
revoke
that.
Article 50 without even asking them. It's only because you realise you're not going to win power.
Can we go back to the original question, which was all about a second referendum? That if the whatever you think of it, if Boris Johnson's deal goes through and we've actually formally left the European Union, I mean, what would the second referendum be on, Denis?
I tend to agree with you on that, Iain. I think I agree with David Davis that a democracy that can't change its mind ceases to be a democracy. We're into the 4th year of Brexit. We usually have elections every 4 years.
But Denis, democracy is meaningless unless the results are implemented.
Please, Belinda, forgive me. I mean, parliaments exist, the US Senate and Congress exist to delay decisions, to discuss them. The idea that Parliament should do exactly what the Prime Minister wants or Congress should do what the President wants is a negation of hundreds of years.
That's a really slow click, though, Denis. I mean, 4 years of clicking, that's a...
Well, I'm sorry.
It was the Conservative Party that couldn't agree. Come on.
And so, to answer Ian's question, if I may, sorry, let's bring it back to Ian.
I thought you had, actually.
I would say, if we leave, that's probably it for some years, and we get into the agony of finding out what it's like to patronisingly tell 450 million people they have to do what Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson and
patronising. I think the one thing that I suspect Belinda and I will agree on tonight is, in terms of patronising, that the 3.5 years and the referendum before, the number of people have patted me on the head, saying I was too old, too stupid, didn't know what I was voting for when I voted to leave, was actually one of the reasons that we actually ended up voting to leave. And that's the biggest lesson that a lot of people in Parliament do not seem to have learned.
Let's just explore the point that Denis was making, that it could take years and years to do this trade deal. But if we are starting from a position of complete convergence, which is not normally, when you normally start trade talks, you are starting completely separate, but we're not starting from there now. So my question would be, is if we start with complete convergence, why should it take so long? Given that the Australians did a trade deal with the Americans in 15 months, shouldn't we be looking at that kind of length of negotiation?
That would be lovely. The Australians have been negotiating with New Zealand since 1921 on apple quotas, because they both produce more apples than the world can consume.
I'll take your word for that one.
And they still can't agree on how they should do it. Paradoxically, the leaving is actually much harder than joining. This is like separating two Siamese twins. Well, because you're interconnected in so many different ways, and every time you say, right, well, let's have this quota on lamb, somebody says, yes, but we'd like to have whatever, Gibraltar settled, or freedom of movement. And somebody will cause a row about that. And so the Switzerland, I think you mentioned, Paul, Switzerland, where I lived for 15 years. The Swiss
It's the third time you've mentioned that.
Well, I have to, because it's often cited, and I'm one of the rare mugs who actually goes to Switzerland, writes about it. Switzerland accepts freedom of movement. They accept a lot of other EU rules. They've been negotiating since 1993. They had a referendum there not to join the European Economic Area. They've got about 40 bilateral deals that have taken years to organise, and they've had to accept an awful lot of things, which you've told people, Paul, not you personally, but Boris Johnson has, and Nigel has, and Trump has. We don't have to accept this because we're proud Brits.
But Denis, just because something is difficult doesn't mean we can't accept change. Otherwise, nothing would have changed over history. I'm sorry, but maybe there'll be disruption. But we can cope and we can manage. And you know that. You all know that. It's just you voted Remain, or you don't want to leave, or you don't want to leave how the Tories or the Brexit Party want to leave. That's why you're putting all this frustration and sabotage into the mix.
Ed, you've been a trade minister. What am I missing here? Because if we already have convergence, surely both sides have to lay on the table how they want to diverge, and the EU will have its priorities here, just as we will have ours. Why should that take the average 7 years that it normally takes to do a trade deal?
Well, two reasons. First of all, you quoted Australia versus the United States deal in 15 months. Those two countries. We've got one country negotiating with 27 countries.
Well, you've got one negotiating team and negotiating on behalf of the 27.
Yes, but it has to be agreed with all the
Yes,
other
you're
countries.
right, but then so did the withdrawal agreement.
Well, indeed, but I don't think we've done very well with the withdrawal agreement. I think it's been a disaster.
But you did say we'd never get one. Do you know
why?
Said Boris wouldn't get one,
let me answer that question. It's a really good. I'm really glad you've raised that point.
Good.
I took Boris Johnson at his word, like the DUP.
Yeah.
I thought he wouldn't put a customs union down the Irish Sea, and guess what? He did. I was wrong. I was naive to believe that Boris Johnson would actually do what he said he was going to do. He completely changed it. So it was easy for him to get. It was easy for him to get to a deal because he shafted the DUP.
Well, he's got a settlement that works for Northern Ireland.
Like he said, no, it doesn't. It's a disaster for Northern Ireland because Northern Ireland might in this deal might end up leaving the United Kingdom. So it's a disaster. But let me answer the question before you interrupted that Iain asked. If you look at the way the EU will negotiate, they've got 27 different countries. You've got Gibraltar with Spain. You could look at each different country and they've got their own issue. It's going to be much more complex than Australia and America. Point one. Point two, this is the first trade deal in history where one country has been wanting to put up trade barriers. Normally in trade negotiations, which people then at least have some experience of, they're trying to pull the barriers down. So this is completely unique, and I think it's going to create a huge problem just for the reason that Denis put. There's going to be a lot of unintended consequences when you've got industries and companies and supply chains that are so interlinked.
But they've had 3.5 years to prepare.
I know, but they haven't done it, have they?
This isn't just something that's suddenly going to happen.
Do you think they've been doing that, Belinda? Come on, get real.
You're going to have to admit, though, that if these negotiations are going to come to something, Britain will have to compromise, just as maybe the EU will have to in some areas.
Nigel Farage is a compromise.
In terms of the kind of regulations that the EU has, we are going to have to accept that there will be some form of regulatory alignment, aren't we?
Well, in certain areas, of course, trade deals always mean compromise. I've got no problem with that whatsoever, but it has to be fair and it has to be respectful. This is the treaty, unfortunately, as it is, the level playing field. I mean, we spend lots of time in Brussels. We hear what Barnier says about how he's going to treat the UK during this the next 12 months. He said he's going to be far stricter on the UK than any other country because of our size and because of our location. The level playing field is a big concern of ours, and I just hope that our gesture to stand down those candidates will be fruitful and Boris will leave in 2020, like he said.
You have to say, though, that was a mistake on Nigel Farage's part, wasn't it, to do that?
I am fully behind ensuring a working Tory party government, not because I want it, but because I believe it's necessary. I think it was an incredibly honourable gesture to stand them down. It's very difficult when you've got people believing in your party and changing
backfired because your party is not part of the debate anymore. Nigel Farage has been almost invisible.
But that's why we're changing politics for good. We are not the narcissistic politicians you see in Parliament today, and I don't mean all of them. I really don't. I have a lot of respect for the MPs who've honoured their manifestos, not the MPs who haven't respected or honoured their manifestos. They don't deserve respect.
Well, some of us have.
But, you know what? I really think that MPs should look in the mirror for just one moment. The reason why we're in this horrific mess is because Parliament's refused.
They're vain enough already. Right, you don't need to encourage them.
Our manifesto was clear.
But Iain, I need to make this point. I'm really sorry. The reason we stood down candidates is we put country before party, and the idea of a Remain alliance coming in and causing destruction and chaos and division again and again for our businesses, for democracy, was not an option, and we put country before party, and I respect
Brexit has united the kingdom, hasn't it?
Well, it's been a second referendum would help do that, would it?
Ed, it's United Democrats.
Don't be nonsense.
Ed and the Lib Dems are the people that asked for a second referendum.
A second referendum would unite the country, would it?
Well, all I'm saying on that is that the country's divided now.
Yeah,
and
we can all agree on that.
The reality is, I don't think there's an outcome, whether it's Brexit, second referendum or whatever, that's actually going to unite the country on this issue. The real thing we've got to do, I think, is actually deal with the real divisions in inequality. And Liberal Democrats, I'm really proud that the Resolution Foundation showed that we are doing most in our manifesto for the working poor, for the 10% poorest, way more than Brexit or the Tories.
This is just a Brexit debate. Yes. Quite a few of you are phoning in on non-Brexit issues. We're not going to take any calls that aren't to do with Brexit. So if you have a Brexit-related question, do give us a call, 0345 6060 973. We're going to take a much-needed breather for a moment while you listen to the news headlines. It's 8:32. Here's Lucinda Horsley.
A 12-year-old boy has died and 4 others are injured following a hit and run outside a school in Essex. Police have started a murder investigation after the teenagers, thought to be pupils, were all struck outside Debden Park in Loughton. A search is underway for the driver of the car involved. Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn have stood side by side to pay tribute to the victims of last Friday's London Bridge terror attack. Jack Merritt and Saskia Jones were remembered in two services, one in London and one in Cambridge, where they both studied. The woman who's accused Prince Andrew of sleeping with her when she was 17 has asked the British public to stand beside her and help her fight this fight. The Duke of York strongly denies the allegations from Virginia Roberts-Giuffre. LBC weather, a cold and clear night across the UK. Some rain about over parts of Scotland. Freezing fog patches in the south of England and Wales. A low of -1.
Election 2019. Continuous coverage on LBC.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery.
Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem.
See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. For exclusive Cyber Monday offers on selected video doorbells and cameras, visit ring.com and major retailers.
You're in leakage, you're in leakage.
Tenna Men. Pants and pads. Buy online or in shops. Tenna Men. Keep control.
For the independent bookseller who found you that first edition.
For the baker who brings the smell of freshly baked breads to your door.
And for the barista, who never needs to ask your name.
We've all got a part to play.
Every little tap keeps your high street alive.
And helps your communities thrive.
So if you love where you live, shop small.
Shopping on your local high street can make a big difference. Shop small. Only by American Express.
The Honda Jazz, the car that feels fabulously small on the outside, yet deceptively big on the inside, with its incredible storage solutions and magic folding seats. Not to mention the suite of advanced safety features. And now with the small but big Jazz event, it's available with 0% APR representative and 5 years complimentary servicing until January 31st. Visit your local dealer to find out more. Honda dealers are credit brokers, not lenders. Finance provided by Honda Finance Europe, authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Terms and conditions apply.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
8:35 here on LBC. Let me reintroduce my panel to you on our cross-question Brexit debate. Sir Ed Davey is Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Denis MacShane, former Labour Minister for Europe, Belinda Delucy, Brexit Party MEP for the South East of England, and Paul Scully, Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party. Don't forget, if you'd like to watch our proceedings, which you might need to do given they all keep talking over each other, you can do so on the LBC website at lbc.co.uk, our Facebook page, Twitter feed or YouTube channel. Right, next call. David's in Cirencester. Hi, David.
Hello. Good evening, panel. I just wanted to ask, Labour are proposing having a second referendum on effectively what will be a Remain versus Remain deal. All I was going to ask is whether the panel think that anybody in favour of leaving would actually vote in that referendum, because I certainly wouldn't, and I don't know many other people who are in favour of leaving who would either.
Paul Scully.
Well, this is when you get into the quandary that we were talking about a little earlier, because I just, it begs the question. I don't know how bad the Labour deal would be. I don't know what I would do in that circumstance, because, frankly, we've had a really straightforward question, really straightforward answer. We just got to get on and do it, which is why we've got a deal that gets us to that second stage. But the idea that Jeremy Corbyn is originally positioned was he was never going to accept any deal that had Conservative on it. Even he could have written a deal, handed it to Theresa May or Boris Johnson, and that got presented back to him, and he'd still vote against it, because for him it was all about the politicisation. Is there a Labour
deal that you could support, though?
Well, I don't know, because actually, what he's talking about, if it was a similar deal to what we've got, then
It's a Tory deal.
If it was a similar deal, if we can have debates.
But the EU have made clear that it would have to be a similar deal, because they're not going to reopen the negotiations.
Well, exactly. So I'm not sure why we're then going to go into a whole nother year of delay. We've got this referendum and the second referendum in Scotland as well. We've been talking in the first half an hour about getting to that next stage, the trade future relationship. All we're doing, basically, by having this is just putting off that stage by a whole nother year. The investment that we're talking about is just going to start to dry up.
Denis MacShane, you know how Brussels works. Are they really going to reopen the withdrawal agreement, and would it be markedly different from the one that there is at the moment?
I do think, I would hope Jeremy would remove the idea of pushing Northern Ireland. I'm not a great fan of the DUP, but I think the United Kingdom counts for something, and they are certainly been shown the exit door. This was on offer 2 years ago. Mrs May refused to accept it because she believed in the union. Boris Johnson doesn't give a toss about the union and is quite happy to send Northern Ireland down the river.
Well, let's get back to the question.
Get onto the main question. I'm fairly sure some form of words could be found. It's in the political declaration, not the actual divorce deal. The money we owe, not being rude to European citizens, and the status of peace in Ireland, which is what it's all about. I'm sure there won't be a lot of tinkering with that, but around it there could be lots of little discussions, we'll decide in a week and a bit. Because if Mr Johnson can't get a majority on the 12th of December, that's it. His hard
but that's
Brexit,
not the question here. The question here is if there is another if Labour wins and they do another deal and then it's put to the people in a referendum, Remain versus the Labour deal, David is saying he wouldn't vote in that referendum because he wouldn't regard it as a legitimate referendum.
Well, that's a perfectly fair point. Don't forget there were 52 million voting age citizens in 2016, 17.4 million voted for Brexit, about a third of them. All the others have been disenfranchised.
People bought into the Leave versus Remain options. If you haven't got consent for the question that is being asked, then people see it as a rigged referendum.
I understand that, and a bit of me, I'm not in Parliament, a bit of me thinks probably, an out, as it were, or a confirmation of 2016 should be on the referendum if we get that.
So have a Leave versus Remain, and then if Leave
now
win...
you've got a three-way referendum. It does become a bit silly. At the end of the day, even the British people stand with Disraeli, and you trust them, or you say you voted once. And that vote is like a Robert Mugabe vote.
No, it just has to be implemented, that's all.
Belinda, forgive me. It's been tried to be implemented. You've got to get Parliament. We're in a democracy. You're not Putin. Nigel Farage likes Putin. He's a good friend of Putin.
No, I'm sorry, Denis.
That's a libelous statement. And Nigel Farage, I've heard him in this studio completely denying that. So just to
stop trying every trick
Belinda.
in the bit. Sorry, Denis, you've had a long time. I just want to make some points very clear, okay? It is not only ludicrous, but it's a total insult to the intelligence of the electorate. Labour conning people again that they're suddenly trying to unite the country by offering the people a Remain versus Remain without a seat at the table option, disenfranchising 17.4 million people to vote Leave. You really think that's going to unify people? It's a con, and you're still trying to con people, and people see very clearly, we see you, we know what you're about. Number two, you say we're in a democracy and we should just leave it to Parliament to sort Brexit out. Parliament is 75% Remain. They promised to implement the result. It was MPs dishonouring their manifestos that caused this chaos. This chaos isn't Brexit. This chaos is it's a crisis in democracy. It's a crisis in our constitution because Western liberals have fallen out of love with democracy, and Brexit was all about replenishing and nourishing that love, that contract between people and their parliament, with which people like the Labour and those who've dishonoured the manifestos have completely broken.
What if the result of the election means that there is still 60 to 70% majority Remainers in Parliament? That next time, that will have been a legitimate vote in a general election. You wouldn't have any cause to complain then, would you?
Well, we're not what I am against is rerunning referendums when the first result hasn't been implemented. That is absolutely anti-democratic. No matter how you try and spin it, it is an abomination and it should never occur. That's how the EU and Europhiles in national parliaments work. They rerun Eurosceptic results. It's not okay and not acceptable. If we are a hung parliament, if more Remainers get voted back, when it's not on a Leave and Remain platform,
that would be partly the result of the Brexit Party standing down for Remain supporting Conservative candidates, wouldn't it?
But Conservative Party is the only party that's supporting Brexit right now. We had no choice. If we were to put the interests of this country and democracy first, we had to stand down against the entire 317, whether they voted Brexit or Remain, because we need a working majority to get at least something done.
Well, going back to David, who was the caller, I actually have some sympathy with him, because we were in Parliament discussing whether or not Theresa May's deal will be put to the electorate versus Remain, and we were sort of arguing that. And I did talk to a number of Brexiteers who were worried that would that be legitimate for them, because they felt that Theresa May's deal didn't give them confidence that that was a real Brexit deal. What's been interesting, and I think not remarked on enough, is that now Nigel Farage has backed Boris Johnson's deal, that you almost feel
he hasn't
that
really, has he?
Well, he sort of done. I mean, I'll allow Nigel Farage to speak for himself, because I'm definitely not speaking for him. But there is a sort of view on the Brexit side that Boris Johnson's deal is so hard Brexit that it sort of brings the Brexiteers together, and it may well be that that is the most legitimate referendum versus Remain. Now, other people can argue about that. But if you are going to have a referendum, which I think we absolutely should, to give the people the final say, then I think you've got to decide which is on the ballot paper. And the only danger with Labour's route, and I've got some sympathy with it, by the way, because I do think any Brexit is a disaster, but the problem that they will have, were they to do it, is that there would be a legitimacy question. No, and so I think David, your caller, does raise a very real point.
Is there not a way out of this? If there is to be a second referendum, that you rerun the first one, Leave versus Remain, with the same franchise, so it's quite clear how the country's mood has shifted, and then you have a second question, that if Leave win that again, by whatever margin, then you have a second question, Boris Johnson's deal or no deal. Then everybody's happy, aren't they?
No.
Well, it's not, it could be that, or it could be the Labour's soft Brexit versus Boris's hard Brexit. So, I mean, there are various permutations.
I don't think you could describe Boris Johnson's deal as hard Brexit, Ed.
I think the DUP would. I think the DUP
very
would.
Quick to make it very quickly. Leaving Brexit means leaving the political institutions of the EU. This hard Brexit, soft Brexit, these are all terms made up by Remainers to try and muddy and fuddle everyone about it. It's just leaving the political institutions.
I want to leave time for two more questions, which I'm going to take together from Ollie and Devinda in just a moment. You're listening to LBC. It's 8:45.
This is LBC.
Follow live, continuous coverage of LBC election 2019.
We'll examine the party policies and check the facts.
Hearing from you about the issues that matter.
I really don't know. Don't want to waste my vote because it means so much right now.
Plus, get all the news you need about the general election in 20 minutes, every 20 minutes, on LBC's brand new sister station, LBC News.
And from now until polling day, LBC's range of podcasts will be speaking directly to those fighting for power. Listen on Global Player or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't miss a moment. LBC election 2019.
Prices are dropping, so you could be saving in the Car Giant Black Friday sale. One giant weekend of massive price reductions on thousands of nearly new cars. There's never been a better time to save on your next car. The Car Giant Black Friday sale now on, ends Monday. Giant choice, giant savings. Visit cargiant.co.uk.
It's how London buys its cars. Car Giant.
For the independent bookseller who found you that first edition.
For the baker who brings the smell of freshly baked bread to your door.
And for the barista who never needs to ask your name.
We've all got a part to play.
Every little tap keeps your high street alive.
And helps your communities thrive.
So if you love where you live, shop small.
Shopping on your local high street can make a big difference. Shop small. Only by American Express.
You're in leakage, you're in leak.
Tenna Men. Pants and pads. Buy online or in shops. Tenna Men. Keep control.
Did you know that bacteria from gum disease may cause Alzheimer's? The GAIN clinical study is testing an investigational drug that may halt the progression of Alzheimer's by reducing damage caused by bacteria that travel to the brain. St Pancras Clinical Research is seeking volunteers aged 55 to 80 with Alzheimer's to participate in the GAIN study. To find out more, please contact St Pancras Clinical Research at stpancrasclinicalresearch.com. That's stpancrasclinicalresearch.com.
Marooned in deep space and no sign of help.
Don't panic. And with the AA, the app lets you track the mechanic right to your side.
I'm thinking of joining the AA. I don't think they accept cats as members. Who said anything about being a member? I want one of those shiny yellow jackets. Ow!
There are lots of smart reasons to join the AA. You'll get unlimited call-outs, our tap and track app, and we'll get you going again in around 30 minutes of arrival. Switch to a different kind of breakdown service from just £5 a month. Visit theaa.com. New customers only. T's and C's apply.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery.
Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem.
See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. For exclusive Cyber Monday offers on selected video doorbells and cameras, visit ring.com and major retailers.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
It's 8:48 with me in the studio for the next 12 minutes. Sir Ed Davey, Denis MacShane, Belinda DeLucy, Paul Scully, taking your calls. We're going to take two questions together now for reasons you'll see in a moment. Ollie's in Bournemouth. Ollie, hi, what's your question, please?
Hi there. I'd just like one simple answer from any person believing in leaving the EU would be better. My question is, why in one answer would leaving the EU benefit the UK?
Okay, and I asked for Devinda for the next caller. I don't want to go. Thank you very much. We have him on the line. Devinda is in Vancouver. Hi.
How you doing, sir?
Very well. What's your question?
My question is actually to Ed Balls.
Ed Balls? I think you mean Ed Davey.
He's not here doing that.
Oh, sorry. A Freudian slip.
Very. Go on.
My apologies. My question is this.
He's been called worse.
As someone who is going to do a postal vote from Vancouver, and someone who is a lifelong Labour voter, your whole idea around revoking Article 50 is worrying for me, because it makes me appreciate the fact that you're effectively writing off 17-point-something million people who said they wanted to leave. Are you not just playing for the middle ground and looking at a coalition here?
Okay, right. Let's go to Belinda first for Ollie's question. One thing that would be better if we left the EU?
It's so difficult to just say one thing. There are so many. The most obvious is saving billions. The amount that is wasted and mismanaged in the EU is verging on criminal. I spend my weeks in Brussels and Strasbourg. I see how much they waste money on forums and quangos and groups to chat about this and groups to chat about that, and sending people off to Jamaica to talk about climate change and give people £300 a day just for clocking into work. It's a disgusting waste of taxpayers' money. I want it rediverted back to our regions. Why am I there? Because I was voted in on a platform.
But why would you even want to be voted into an institution that you clearly despise?
Do you know, we have been completely demonised and censored Brexiteers. We have been shamed into staying in the closet and not being able to speak our minds in this horrible, hostile environment that the Lib Dems and Labour have created. And this has given us a wonderful platform to talk about the benefits of Brexit and also to expose the flaws of the EU firsthand while we're in Parliament. And I'm telling you, the mismanagement of our taxpayers' money is disgusting. We need it rediverted to our regions that so desperately need it.
Okay.
And don't even start me on democracy. That's another subject.
Saving money, Paul Scully.
Look, Ed Davey's chuckling, but actually Lib Dems have moved to the extreme end of the Brexit argument because, 5 minutes ago they wanted to revoke Article 50, even though this hour has been talking about people's vote. But to answer the question, I mean, I could talk about returning sovereignty, so you've got a direct line of accountability. You could talk about the fairer immigration system, but actually these are things that we can do relatively quickly. But it's the realignment of trade, actually, over the medium to long term that I think is key for me. I've been a trade envoy for Burma, Myanmar and Thailand, and I've done a lot of travelling over the last few years, been very fortunate. And actually the goodwill to British brands, British engineering, British expertise and consultancy work in engineering and precision work is palpable, actually. And so the fact is, if you look at back at history, about the fact that 19th century and before, Great Britain were becoming a very wealthy country around the world. 20th century was America, it was Germany and Japan. But the 21st century really does belong to Asia. It's India, China, but the ASEAN countries in between as well. And actually having that realignment, I think, is really exciting.
I am going to put this question to Denis and Ed as well, which you may think is a bit of a forlorn thing to do. But putting aside your affiliations on this, can you actually think of any benefit from Brexit whatsoever? Just one small thing.
There is one tiny thing. And that's within the common agricultural policy, you'd have a little bit more freedom about how you spend a relatively small amount of money. And I think probably about 0.1% of GDP you'd be able to improve. The only problem is the 99.9% would be worse. So it's not much of a gain.
Well, you have restored my faith in politics a little bit by just actually saying that, because I was imagining that you might say no, nothing whatsoever. Dennis, can you think of anything?
Yes, I think I'm very worried about Nigel Farage's health. He's looking much more drawn.
Seriously?
And he'll now be able to retire.
Seriously?
After 20 years.
Is that seriously your answer?
Well, frankly, I want Britain to be a player everywhere in the world and walking out of the world's biggest market and one of its most influential international organisations.
Okay, well, you clearly haven't
with
got
your faith
answers
having
to that.
been restored, Ian.
Yeah, I know. Dennis, I'm afraid you've blown it there. Now, Devinder's question, I obviously want to put to you, Ed. This policy of revoking Article 50, I must admit, when it was announced, I thought that's a bit of a masterstroke from the Lib Dems because they are differentiating themselves from Labour. It's a very clear policy that everyone can understand. Hasn't really worked, though, for you, has it?
Well, the policy is stop Brexit. And we've basically said we want to do that democratically. And in Britain, there's two ways to do it democratically. You either win at a general election, which would mean the Liberal Democrats going from the 12 seats we won 2 years ago to 326, in which case I think we'd have a mandate, because it'd be a bit of a political earthquake. I think we can agree on that. Or you have another referendum, a people's vote. And the reality is, in this election, I don't think that we're going to see the political earthquake I'd like, and therefore Liberal Democrat MPs, if we elect them, are going to be putting their votes, presumably with others, for a people's vote.
That's fine, but that's not quite what was being said at the beginning of the campaign, is it? Because
it's always been the same, actually.
No. I was getting leaflets coming through my door telling me that Joe Swinson is the next Prime Minister. So therefore, and the revoked Article 50 thing was very high up the agenda. Now, I get why it isn't anymore, because clearly that isn't going to happen. And you're on the slide in the opinion polls, and you know full well that a lot of your own supporters don't like this revoke Article 50 policy. You must be hearing that on the doorstep yourself.
Sure, but all I'm saying is our policy was revoke if we won and got a majority, if Joe had been had won and become the Prime Minister. But at the same time, saying if that didn't happen, and it's in our manifesto, so you can check it out, I'm not very transparent, we'd keep backing a people's vote. And I think basically being democratic about that is exactly the right thing. And so I get very cross when people say you're not being democratic. Absolutely be democratic. You either get a democratic mandate or you get people to vote. And listen, one thing I just got to comment on about the sovereignty issue that Paul Scully raised, because the sovereignty issue is being misplayed by all Brexiteers throughout this debate. The reality about Europe is it deals with international issues of trade, single market, climate change. And the reality is, if we leave, we'll have to work with other countries. It could just be far more ineffective. We won't be at the table, because we've always been able to deal with domestic issues. Europe is about dealing with international issues. Try dealing with international issues.
But it does also
by
have
yourself.
domestic implications, domestic trading implications.
Go back to the question.
Domestic
International
you have 6% of companies export, but 100% have to deal with the regulations.
I think Devinda in Vancouver, get the stamp on the envelope, old son. I don't know how long it takes to get from the west coast of Canada to your.
Well, I was thinking that
constituency. But asking the very fair point about the revoke issue. I was very impressed at the beginning of September. You had an across-party alliance. Parties that really hate each other. You were united for the country to stop two things: an instant general election. Do you remember when Boris suspended Parliament, Mr Johnson suspended Parliament, and secondly, an instant Brexit? And it was stopped dead by something called democracy and a huge protest in London. I thought, that's it. That's the Scots Nats. That's Plaid Cymru. That's the Greens. That's Northern Ireland independent unionists and the nationalists. We actually may be able to say to the 2/3 of the country that didn't vote for Brexit, you will again have a voice. And then, unfortunately, Miss Swinson, who I wish well, blew it with her rather absurd. I mean, certainly if the Liberal Democrats win 330 seats, she could do it. I'll get a very big cup if I win Wimbledon, but I have to live in the real world. And she blew apart.
It's a veterans tournament.
That alliance.
Because he's not in Parliament now, so
we haven't got. Well, thank you. Don't patronise me.
No, you've interrupted everyone else.
We haven't got any of the Scottish nationalists around here. And I was with Labour's best judge in Scottish politics earlier this evening. He thinks they're going to do very well. We haven't got the independent alliance unionists in Northern Ireland who don't take the DUP line. They're going to do quite well. I wish the Liberal Democrats well, and I think at the end of this election, you're not going to get Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister.
I hope not.
But we can defeat Donald Trump's friend as Prime Minister and move to allowing the people to
let's just get a quick comment. Ollie, you got 2 suggestions there of things that would be better off. Did they satisfy you?
No. The first one, from vague memory, from listening to what the Right Honourable Lady said,
nice.
was obviously
the money.
We'll be saving money from so and so gets £300 from blah 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 blah. It's been proven by the Fiscal Institute, etc. The Financial Times have even come out and said that we will be several million, if not billion pounds out of pocket. Billions of pounds.
Okay, so you clearly don't agree with that. We're nearing the end of the programme, so I just want to get a quick comment from Devinda. But I actually want to know, why don't you use a proxy vote, Devinda, rather than a postal vote?
Well, the postal vote was meant to be quicker, but we've actually just received it this morning.
Well, I would get that back in the post right now.
I'll send the plane over.
What did you think of Ed's answer?
The truth is, this is a tough one. I don't think anyone's going to be able to say resounding yes or no, but no, I think it's fence-sitting. It really is.
Okay. Thomas says, please kindly control your guests in your usual diplomatic way. I've tried my best. I really have. Quick final text question from Mary in Weybridge. President Trump is coming to the UK tonight. He wasn't greeted with a warm welcome last time he came here. You might remember the infamous blimp. If the panellists had a chance to share a conversation with him, what would be the first thing that they would tell him, and keep it clean? Paul Scully.
I would say that don't get involved in the UK election, but let's start a trade deal as soon as we can.
You aren't praying, but you look as if you probably ought to be on that. Don't get involved in the UK election. Denis MacShane.
I'd say, Donny, old son, don't tweet for 24 hours. Try reading something called a book.
Oh, cutting.
I think Ed Davey lost it at Donny.
The climate emergency is a real threat to the United States and the rest of the world. Please change your policy on climate change.
I was looking for something funny.
Oh, sorry.
Belinda.
I would say thank you for your support and belief in our country via Brexit, but please watch your language. Trump, your country deserves better than that.
Right, well, thank you very much indeed. Well, that was a feisty hour, wasn't it? Thanks to Sir Ed Davey, Denis MacShane, Belinda DeLucy and Paul Scully. Coming up in a moment, Labour has today announced it will cut rail fares by 1/3. Is this just an electoral bribe, which will only really benefit commuters in the South East, or is it a policy which will make you look at Labour with a fresh eye? Give me a call now, 0345 6060 973. This is LBC. I'm Iain Dale. It's 9.